Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to the next part of the MTG Arena set review. Today with the Simic cards, before we are done with the rest of the cards tomorrow. As usual, you know the drill. Before we hop into the card discussion, hit the subscribe button down below, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content, and please consider whitelisting YouTube to help support the content for free. Alright, on to the cards. So first off, we have Birthing Pod Speaker Vannifar, aka Prime Speaker Vannifar. This is basically Birthing Pod as a creature. It's a 4-mana 2/4 for tapping and sacrificing a creature. You do what Birthing Pod does. You search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to or 1 plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost, and put that card onto the battlefield. And then shuffle your library, blah blah blah. It can only be used as a sorcery, unlike Birthing Pod, which can be used as an instant, so that's one of the downsides. But it has the upside of getting a creature with mana cost equal to the cost of the creature you sacked. I think Birthing Pod was a forced forced casting cost +1, so this is a bit more flexible than what it can get, and obviously it's a creature, so it is more vulnerable than Birthing Pod, and has summoning sickness. But yeah, all in all, pretty good card. In limited, this seems really powerful, especially in like a multicolor deck with some afterlife stuff, to get extra value out of it on a bunch of like summon effects and so on. This could also see some play in standard. Definitely an interesting card. We'll have to see how things shake out. This ends up being something that is viable in standard. I doubt it's going to be relevant anywhere else, though, outside of standard. But in limited especially, this seems like a pretty good 4-drop. Next we have Hydroid Krasis, one of the most powerful cards to come out of the set currently for standard. Basically a 2-mana plus XX flying and trample, and when you cast it, you gain half the life and draw half the amount of cards that you spend for X, rounded down. So for 4 mana, it's a 2/2 flying trample that draws you a card and gains you a life. For 6 mana, it's a 4/4 flying that gains you 2 life and draws you 2 cards and so on. Also keep in mind, it is when you cast it, so even if it gets countered, your opponent, you draw the cards. So this will usually be a 6-drop in constructed, sometimes more, and if you're in a lot of trouble, less, but I expect drawing 2 cards and gaining 2 life is what you usually can expect to get from this, and that's pretty strong, especially given that the opponent can't really stop it by countering it, because you still draw your 2 cards, so you get a really good deal out of this no matter what, like a 3-for-1 and a pretty good threat. In limited, this is also obviously a bomb. Outside of standard, however, this is too slow and expensive, so it's only a standard and limited card, but in both of these formats it's a monster basically. This card is gonna be everywhere in standard. Next we have Zegana Utopian Speaker, another Simic 4-drop. It's a 4-mana 4/4. When she enters the battlefield, if you control another creature with a +1/+1 counter on it, you draw a card, so that's already pretty nice. 4-mana 4/4 that replaces itself under a condition is really nice. Then she has Adapt 4 for 6 mana. That's kind of expensive, but even in constructed this will come up occasionally. In limited, this is really powerful, turning her into an 8/8. And each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. That's not super impressive, but works well with her. Bit surprising that she has this clause, given that we already have an uncommon that does that. But yeah, definitely a very strong limited card, and could even be playable in constructed if there's a deck that wants her. But power level wise, it's definitely there, since a 4-mana 4/4 that draws a card is a pretty good standard card usually. Not quite Krasis, but still good. Next we have Combine Guildmage. Pretty good Guildmage actually, I think. The green ability is not that great. Basically you can pay 2 mana and tap this to make a creature that you play a bit bigger and benefit from potential +1/+1 counter synergies. The most interesting ability is the blue one that can actually make life pretty bad for your opponent in limited, and even allows you to sort of generate counters with adaptabilities. If you have a cheap adaptability, you just use it, move the counters onto something else, adapt again, and so on and so forth. So this has some really cool synergies in Simic decks, and also the ability to move counters around allows you to long-term size your creatures the way you need to size them, and also makes combat quite painful for your opponent, because there are so many options that you can threaten with this that it's going to be hard for the opponent to play properly against all of them. Next we have Frilled Mystic, the return of Mystic Snake. This time it's a 3/2, and instead of a snake it's an elf lizard wizard, but does the same. But is harder to cast, costs double green instead of single green. But yeah, still an interesting card. Format has definitely, power level definitely has changed since back in the day. So a Mystic Snake type card, even a slightly power inflated one, isn't quite as good, I think, as it used to be in the past in Standard. But card is still fairly strong and could end up seeing some play in Standard. I'm not sure if there is a Simic heavy enough deck that actually wants this and can support it mana wise. And limited, however, this is a really good uncommon, and at least I would say in the middle of the pack of this cycle, maybe third best, because the Drool and Azorius are just good bodies, but not really 2-for-1s, while the Rakdos and Orzhov are really good 2-for-1s, and this is a conditional really good 2-for-1 too, although it has the smallest body. Sorry about that. The smallest body of the 2-for-1 creatures. But yeah, pretty high pick if you are in colors that can support it, and we'll see if there's a home for it in Standard. Next we have Biomancer's Familiar. 2 mana 2/2. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost 2 less, but can't be reduced below 1. Giving you some nice synergies with a bunch of creatures in Standard, especially Adapt, but also some other stuff. And the next time target creature adapts this turn, it adapts as though it had no +1/+1 counters on it if you tap this guy. So it also allows you to repeatedly adapt creatures and make them bigger and bigger. This could have some implication in Standard. First of all, the ability cost reduction is a potentially pretty big deal with the right cards, like Terramanda and plenty of options. I can't think of all of them right now, but yeah, definitely a potentially powerful ability, and the tap ability is not that relevant because tapping a creature to do that alone already is pretty tempo inefficient, but it gives you some nice options in a stall and gives you some inevitability because you can just make your stuff humongously sized. And yeah, it's a 2 mana 2/2, so that's also not bad. We'll have to see if there is some viable deck in Standard that wants this guy, but power level wise it's definitely an interesting card for Standard. And I mean, in Limited, 2 mana 2/2s are already very solid, and with all the upside here of making your Adapt super cheap and making your stuff potentially ginormous, makes this a really good pick in Limited. Next we have Simic Ascendancy. Not quite sure how good this card is. It's definitely not a constructed card, but in Limited this could actually be quite good. For 3 mana you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and whenever 1 or more counters are put on a creature you control, you put that many gross counters on Simic Ascendancy. So basically all your Adapt and stuff charge this up, and once Ascendancy has 20 or more gross counters on it, you win the game. So effectively you can spend 3 mana to charge this up and in the process also grow your guys. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting alternate win condition, but I feel like Simic decks will be more about like board presence and size than trying or needing to win with this way. You usually outsize everything with Adapt and have your Adapt synergies and stuff, so you should usually be able to win this way. So I don't really see the need for this. And in strategies that might be interested in a like stalling out and winning with something like this, they are not really good at supporting this, so it seems a bit of an odd fit for a guild like Simic. But let me know in the comments what you think. Maybe it is better than I think it is. It seems kind of out of place. I recently had it as a potential first pick in draft and ended up taking something else over it because I felt like it's kind of situational and either wins you the game when you hit the 20 plus, or it basically isn't even worth the card you invested in it and the mana you invested in it. Next we have Galloping Lizrog. That's some pretty cool artwork and one of the funny hybridizations that the Simic got going on with their gene experiments. But yeah, it's a 5 mana 3/3 trample. And when it comes into play, you can remove any number of +1/+1 counters from among creatures you control, and then you put twice the amount of +1/+1 counters on Lizrog. So usually you want to eat at least 1 counter, maybe 2, make this a 5 mana 5/5 trample or 5 mana 7/7 trample. Like, eating 2 counters is probably ideal because then you effectively get a 5/5 trample that moves 2 counters on it from other creatures, which seems like a pretty good rate. Otherwise you kind of end up with a 4/4 trample for 5 that moves a counter on it, because you basically have to halve the counter count to evaluate the base stats that you're getting for the 5 mana, because moving counters from somewhere else on the Lizrog is not part of the cost. Sure, it has some value potentially, especially if the creature isn't as impactful and kind of stalled out, and then you have this big Lizrog that suddenly can attack really well or completely stall out your opponent like you couldn't before. But it's still stats you already had that you don't get for the 5 mana. So you gotta keep that in mind. But it is a pretty good 5-drop. Not too high of a pick, but after the first couple picks, if there are no premium picks anymore, this is a pretty good pickup, I think. Next we have Gyre Engineer. Gyre Engineer is a 3 mana 1/1. Ramps you for 2 mana, giving you a lot of mana for potential additional adapts or expensive adapt costs, or just ramping into something big, quick and early. I haven't had the opportunity to play that much with this guy yet, but it seems really powerful. This kind of fast mana is usually really good in limited, especially when you have a lot of things to sink the mana into. So this seems pretty good, and it also happens to help you fix your colors a little bit in the process. Seems a bit too fragile and slow for constructed though. Next we have Sharktocrab, another pretty amazing uncommon. I would say 4 mana 4/4 is already a pretty good deal, and whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Sharktocrab, you tap target creature an opponent controls, and that creature doesn't untap during your opponent's next untap step. So it's basically a 4 mana 4/4 that kind of gives you a spell that says put a +1/+1 counter on Sharktocrab and tap target creature and opponent controls, and it doesn't untap. And yeah, that's pretty good. Like the 4 mana 4/4 would already be a very solid limited card usually, and that ability just pushes it over the top. This is at least at the same level as A-Rings. To be fair, A-Rings is a common, but it's extremely good for common, and this is an uncommon, but I would say this is even a bit better, since the adapt ability and synergy with other counter producing stuff like the 1 mana trick and stuff should push this slightly over the top of A-Rings at the very least. So yeah, a really high pick. I think this is a premium uncommon, and happily first pick this in a fair share of picks. But I haven't gotten to play with it yet, so keep that in mind. Next we have Aeromunculus, another very solid multicolor card for limited, 3 mana 2/3 flying that you can later for 4 mana turn into a 3/4. 3/4 means in this format it blocks most of the creatures and even kills them in combat. There are a lot of 3/3 flyers or 2/3 flyers or 3/2 flyers that so 3/4 is like kind of the critical size of beating most things. There are a couple of 4/4s, but not a whole lot. So yeah, this lines up really well, and the 3 mana 2/3 flyer alone already is a pretty good deal. So very good common to fill out your curve, and obviously also has +1/+1 counter synergies, which come in handy. Next we have applied Biomancy. For 2 mana you get to either bounce target creature, or target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Bit surprised that it's +1/+1 and not a +1/+1 counter, given that would be a lot more synergetic and flavorful for Simic, but probably also too good, which is why they didn't do it. But yeah, the card's really flexible and lets you either win a close combat or just generate a lot of tempo, or even return a creature that has been locked down by an enchantment, like the 3 mana Azorius Base Fetchers type enchantment. The Lawmaker's Binding, I think. So yeah, a pretty good utility card. Not too high of a pick, but happy to pick them up, and I could happily see myself play more than one of these Simic deck. Then we have Growth Spiral. This is actually more impactful in Standard than in Limited. Especially the Banned Fog Nexus deck is really happy about this. So are some of the gate control decks, and who knows what else this might be good in. Definitely nice to see a instant speed Explore it's limited to 2 colors, but the fact that it's an instant makes it play particularly well in controlling decks where otherwise Explore usually wasn't very good because you kind of want to leave your mana open, but now you can. So nice card. In Limited, this is a fine filler in more multicolor controlling gate type decks. Probably not something you want in most Simic decks because they're going to be more board and creature oriented, I would think. Then we have Scuttlegator, 6 mana 6/6 defender, adept for 8 mana, turns it into a 9/9 and lets it attack as though it didn't have defender. The nice thing is you can also make it attack with other things that give it counters, so that's a nice bonus. And a 6 mana 6/6 wall is still fine. Like, it's not insane, it's not something that you probably want in most Simic decks. It's more a card for the multicolor gate controlling decks, but there it seems pretty good. Then we have Repudiate, Replicate. Repudiate, basically Stifle. It counters an activated or triggered ability, kind of niche, and a bit expensive at 2. And then Replicate, for 3 mana you create a token that's a sorcery. That's a copy of target creature you control. It's a sorcery, but for 3 mana that's a pretty good deal to have a clone that only works on your things. So in Limited, this is still a pretty good and flexible card. Not quite as good as some of the other split cards in the other color combinations that we've seen, but still decent. In Constructed, it might end up seeing some play mainly because of Repudiate, because it's kind of a unique effect and there might be cases where a deck would want it, but I'm not sure if there will be, but it's imaginable, so it's a card that is not completely irrelevant Standard. And last but not least, we have Incubation Incongruity. This card is comparably underwhelming to the other split cards, especially the other uncommon split cards that we've seen, since Incubation is kind of the better mode of the two, where this is usually a hybrid mode, like the incremental one, and they kind of have nothing to do, you do this. But so you get basically a 1 mana commune with nature that can only get creatures, not lands, I think. Anyway, the commune card, I might be mixing them up now. Anyway, it's 1 mana, look at the top 5 cards of your library, and reveal a creature card from a main. Put it in your hand, and Incongruity, as an instant for 3 mana, exiles target creature, and that creature's controller gets a 3/3 proc. It has some flexibility, but it's kind of bad as removal, because the opponent needs to have a big bomb for this to actually be a relevant downgrade, like a like a minor downgrade, like turning a 4/4 flyer into a 3/3 ground creature. Can be good enough, but it's not that great of a deal, especially for a card and for 3 mana. So gotta keep that in mind. Obviously you can also use it as a trick on your things and stuff. There is some flexibility to it, but compared to some of the other cards, it's a pretty weak and situational type of effect. But the card still ends up being reasonably playable if your deck has some high quality creatures you can dig for with Incubation and then get the added utility of Incongruity. But this is actually one of the split cards you might not want to put in your main deck every time and only sometimes in Limited. And in Constructed, we probably have better options than Incubation, but there might be a scenario where we have a deck that wants Incubation, because I think the only other effect similar in Standard right now, other than Impulse, Adventurous Impulse, is a Dinosaur tribal version of this effect. So if there's a deck that's looking for this, this could end up seeing play for Incubation, but not for Incongruity. Okay, this rounds out the 5 guilds. This was the last guild with Simic. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Tomorrow I'll be wrapping up the series with the rest of the artifacts and lands that I was discussing. There's only a handful. So then we are done with the series. So let me know in the comments what you think. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the series, share it with your friends, and of course subscribe to the channel for more content and turn on the notification icon to get notified as soon as there's new stuff coming up. And I'll be making content as often as possible, so make sure to not miss anything. I'm already working on some deck lists to put out some deck techs in the coming days and weeks. Okay, that's it again for this time. One last request. Please help support the free content by whitelisting YouTube on your adblock or turning off your adblock when watching the content. That would really help a lot. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm your host ManuS. See you next time.